Coming up next, we've got political science professor from Fairmont State University, Robert Bolton. We're going to be talking about the Democrat makeup of the electorate as we approach the November general election. That's coming up next on Talk of the Town, AM 1440, FM 104.5, WAJR.
We're talking about your town. Now back to the Talk of the Town.
Good Thursday morning. It is 9:41 in the University City. Plenty of clouds, 68 degrees. We are under a wind advisory until 6 p.m. today. On the phone, we've got Professor Robert Bolton, political science professor from Fairmont State University. Good morning, Robert. How are you?
Good morning, Mike. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. It is a pleasure to have you on board. Now, Robert, wanted to talk with you this morning about the midterm election and specifically a little bit about some of the Democrat candidates that are being introduced nationally that would suggest that the party is lurching to the left. A lot of these candidates present themselves as Democrats, but then say that they are members of the Democrat Socialist Party. I guess, how do you assess what's taking shape?
Well, it's important to remember that I think many Democratic candidates in the Democratic Party nationwide are feeling relatively confident right now. It's important to remember that pretty much every president, with about three exceptions in the 20th and 21st century, who's incumbent, their party has lost seats in Congress. And so the Democrats look at the economy right now. They say, okay, there's a lot of dissatisfaction with gas prices. Obviously, the recent immigration raids have been extremely controversial. There's concern not only at the pump, but also with groceries, the cost of food. And then, quite frankly, Trump himself is a polarizing figure, and they know even though he gets many people out to go vote for him, they usually are going to be less likely to go out and vote for the people who are down ballot. So they are feeling confident, but it's important to remember, much like the Greek tragedy, hubris oftentimes comes before the fall. So I do think with at least some of the candidates, which we will end up discussing, there is a chance that by reaching too far to the left, those candidates are going to end up actually hurting the Democrats. I should be clear. I think the Democrats will gain seats in Congress in the midterms. I would be shocked if they don't. But I do believe with at least some of these candidates, they are going to end up losing elections or will face a tougher race that could have been an easy win with a more moderate candidate.
You know, one candidate, Robert, that really interests me a lot is Graham Platner in the state of Maine, because, 20 years ago, I don't think this guy could have even gotten near a Democratic headquarters to even submit a resume to run. Now he's got major party figures that are really kind of carrying his water to make up for some of his personal and ethical shortcomings.
Yeah, Graham Platner out of Maine is a very interesting circumstance, a very interesting candidate. It's important to note that his big rival within the Democratic primary was the incumbent governor of Maine, Janet Mills, and she suspended her campaign about 2 months ago because she was able to read the tea leaves and saw that he was almost certainly going to win the nomination. Now, after it came out that he had multiple issues, he had been making a number of posts pseudonymously on Reddit and other social media accounts talking about his use of hallucinogenics. It came out right around the time of the election that he had been unfaithful to his wife, texting multiple women with sexual content. And then to me, the most concerning thing was during his military service, he had a neo-Nazi tattoo of skull and crossbones from the paramilitary organization, the Schutzstaffel, the SS from Nazi Germany, and claimed that he did not know what that was. Now, Governor Mills, in the last days before the election, she did make a half-hearted campaign comment. Well, I'm still on the ballot if you want to log a protest vote. But I think that those issues are going to be something that are served up to the Republicans, and Susan Collins, the Republican incumbent in Maine, who's facing a very tough re-election battle. Those are issues that have been served up on a silver platter for her that she can use radio and television ads throughout the general election campaign this fall.
Got the Fairmont State University political science professor with us, Robert Bolton. So in an effort to try to localize this Platner thing, when you look at that through the lens of, say, maybe Toby and Edith, they've got to have a hard time to try to meet him halfway in order to be party loyal, I would think. What do you think?
I think it puts many Democrats, both at the local level and at the national level, in an awkward position because, again, this is a guy who has a Nazi tattoo that he only in the last year or so has had covered up, and he claims he didn't know what it meant. You're either stupid or you're lying if that's the case because, again, there was the internet. It's a pretty common symbol within military histories. And so if you're someone who's campaigning for this guy, I think it's going to be through gritted teeth. And Maine is something where is a race where Susan Collins is very vulnerable. She's faced two very tough re-election campaigns in her last two races. And most political observers would say if this were a normal race with a normal candidate, she would probably be cruising to losing the election in November. So the Democrats basically say, look, you dance with the one who brought you, and Mr. Platner is the one who won the nomination. They know that he will caucus with the Democrats in the Senate if he does win the election. And so, they have to grit their teeth and bear it because if he would end up withdrawing from the race, which there's been no indication that would happen unless something new comes out, but if he did withdraw from the race, they know that would almost certainly leave them in a free fall between June and November.
Yeah, Robert, in recent years, it would seem or it would appear that the Democrat National Party has maybe gotten involved in the nomination process to a much greater extent than what they are now. And I think that Platner nomination and the defense of Platner kind of shows that maybe the National Democratic Party is pulling back just a little bit.
I think there's a little bit of that. You also have to remember, look, there are only so many dollars in the kitty. So we have to say, okay, every dollar we spend on this Maine race is one that we may not be able to allocate to another race, be it I'm trying to think of another battleground state off the top of my head, but another battleground state that may be a bit more viable for them. Right now, polls are showing Platner's a little bit ahead, but we're only in mid-June, so you've got almost 4.5 months, which is a lifetime in politics, between now and the November election. And I think many party insiders are saying, is this really the guy we want to focus most of our money on? So, I do think there is a little bit of drawback from them. I do think that their support is receding a little bit.
You bring up a great point because right now the Republicans are sitting on a war chest of cash that maybe 2 to 3 times of what the Democrats are sitting on. So that's going to make some tough decisions for Democrats coming up in the future.
I think that's absolutely true. One thing that Donald Trump has been very savvy about is even though he won the election in 2024, he did learn a couple of important lessons, I think, from his first term. And one of the big ones was that he was impeached twice. Rightly or wrongly, but the only reason he probably survived is because he had party loyalists and the second impeachment attempt in 2021 was a relatively close vote. It was not 67 votes, but you did have a couple of Republican defectors. And so since then, one of the things that President Trump has repeatedly been campaigning on is endorsing people who will be guaranteed to be loyal to him. You've seen that happen in Georgia. You have seen that happen in Louisiana with the recent defeat of the incumbent senator. You've seen that in Texas. Same thing with the incumbent senator being defeated, because Trump knows even though he is constitutionally limited to only 2 terms, he wants whoever his successor is to win. And even more importantly, I think he wants to, as best as possible, be able to pass as much of his agenda come 2027 and 2028 and avoiding those domestic distractions that were such a headache in his first term when he faced an opposition Congress.
So leads me to the last question, Robert, and that is, does this election bring us closer together, or does it just maybe make polarization a little bit more of a thing?
Oh, I think polarization is probably as bad as it's been. I mean, certainly in my lifetime, certainly since the end of the Cold War, I think we are far more polarized than we have been in decades. And I don't think that that is something good for the country. Something I often talk to my students about is look, we may have very different views on issues, but we're all Americans, and we need to remember that lesson. We're all in this fight together. But there was a very interesting article in the New York Times just a couple of days ago from a geospatial scientist who was analyzing the recent gerrymandering efforts by both parties. And he basically said up to this point, it's likely that the Republicans are the net winners on it. But if you pushed it to the max, surprisingly, the parties as they are right now, it isn't going to change the overall composition of the Congress that much. But what it will do is it will pretty much guarantee that each party will be dominated by its extremely conservative and its extremely liberal members. The moderates of both parties are already pretty rare. Even in the 1980s, there were academic publications about the liberal Republican, what they used to call the Rockefeller Republican, is extinct. And if you're a conservative Democrat, maybe there are still a few here in the hollers of West Virginia, but nationwide, if you're a blue dog Democrat, you are a rare breed nowadays. There are not very many of them left. And I don't think that that's good for either party or the nation writ large, because it doesn't allow for those types of bargaining positions that are necessary to pass meaningful legislation. I would much rather, as an American, have half a loaf than no loaf at all. And regardless of which party's in power, if you are like Speaker Johnson is in the House of Representatives right now, where you have a majority that's only by, you could count on one hand, it makes it almost impossible to pass your agenda because you end up having to placate every person within your party, because even if 2 or 3 vote against your agenda, suddenly you've lost your majority.
Fairmont State University political science professor Robert Bolton. Robert, thank you very much for your insight and your time today.
Hey, no problem, Mike. I very much enjoyed it.
Absolutely. You take care of yourself. We'll do it again very soon. We'll be back to wrap up the program right after this on Talk of the Town, AM 1440, FM 104.5, WAJR.